Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show for Monday, November 30th, 2020. Just when you think the news can't get any stranger, any wilder. Well, 2020 never fails to disappoint. Was there a firefight between two different branches of the United States Armed Forces at a server farm in Frankfurt, Germany? I'll be talking about that in a little more detail in a couple of minutes. But I'm going to start with Jim Kunstler's column today, Behind the Scenes in Swamptopia. Apart from the soporific side effects of eating all that leftover turkey for 3 more days after Thursday's celebration of gluttony, this holiday weekend was news-wise as still as the mummy's tomb, or rather Joe Biden's basement. Well, I'll have more on update on Joe Biden shortly. Yet these post-election days are gravid with portent. The major newspapers and cable news platforms report nothing beyond their heartwarming narrative of Biden rising with woke times a-comin'. But the casual observer senses powerful intrigues swirling backstage in Swamptopia. Something tells me the scene is about to liven up this week, even explode. There's the matter of the Kraken. Perhaps Sidney Powell was not speaking just figuratively about the lurking monster of the deep. The Kraken apparently is an actual computer system developed by the Department of Defense to ferret out malevolent computer programs as might be deployed in cyber warfare or janky elections. Ms. Powell has had legal consort all year with General Mike Flynn, the former chief of the Defense Intelligence Agency, railroaded on a fake charge by the FBI, now pardoned, free to speak and act. Do you suppose that General Flynn does not know about the agency's cyber warfare capabilities, or that he does not know how they might be put to use, or how the Kraken intersects with 2 CIA proprietary election hacking programs, Hammer and Scorecard? Next, there is the matter of where these agencies stand with each other these days. It was not for nothing that the president sacked cheeky Secretary of Defense Mark Esper and replaced him with Christopher Miller, a Special Forces warrior, lately as Deputy Assistant SecDef in charge of counterterrorism, military information support operations, information operations, unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, direct actions, special reconnaissance, foreign internal defense, counter-proliferation, sensitive special operations. Kind of sounds a little bit like exactly the skill set you'd need to battle the rogue resistance operations across several U.S. government agencies in their 4-year quest to overthrow the chief executive, climaxing in this election caper. For one example, the CIA. Somehow, when I think of the CIA, I think of the sinister John Brennan, architect of Russiagate, and probably also somehow behind the activation of his protege, the whistleblower and CIA agent, and I'm not going to mention his name because YouTube will probably stop this stream. The impeachment mole who was allowed to retreat back into the CIA fortress with no consequences after his seditious deed was done. Notice Brennan has been tweeting like mad in recent days denouncing election skeptics. Is he worried about something? All of which raises the questions. What role did the agency play in the election with its mystifying vote tallying irregularities? Does Brennan still wield influence in the CIA? And is the agency an enemy of the people? Then, what do you suppose really went down at that computer server farm in Frankfurt, Germany after the election? Chatter on the web has it that the Frankfurt asset was a CIA installation and that some kind of Army Special Forces unit bum-rushed the joint after November 3rd and took possession of computer servers that were used to receive vote tabulations from Dominion machines back in the USA. There's even rumor of some people getting hurt in the operation, unconfirmed. Do those servers hold actual evidence of vote tampering? That would be my guess. Perhaps we'll find out this week. And if it were the case that the CIA and other actors, perhaps even in foreign countries, worked to rig the election to make absolutely sure that Trump was finally expelled from office, would this not amount to something like treason? Is the U.S. government at war with itself? If so, does the president not have a duty to do something about it? Is he in the process of doing something that the public is not yet aware of through and beyond the holiday week? Did Mr. Biden or Kamala Harris know about any of this? Allegations with actual evidence emerged in October that Biden and his family received large sums of money for services rendered from several countries considered not friendly to the USA. Maybe that's just a sidebar to the election op, but it sure doesn't look good considering. A reasonable authority might designate Joe Biden a national security risk. Such a person would not be permitted to take an oath for the highest office in the land. So with Thanksgiving behind us and Christmas a month away, and a very fraught COVID Christmas at that, and the deadline for the state's electoral vote certifications and the actual meeting of the electoral collegians looming in between now and then, we might gird our loins for some very weird doings out of Washington, D.C., unless it's all just a bad dream, a conspiracy theory, a blather of peevish, deplorable nutters who just refuse to bend over and take it good and hard from their betters, as they deserve to. Standing by, just as you are, on developments. Let's take a look at the Panic Report, formerly known as the Drudge Report, and I'll have more on Matt Drudge later on this stream. Joe Woe, Biden fractures foot, hires all-female senior communications team, eyes Rahm Emanuel for cabinet. Trace, majority of positives from people shopping, California lockdown likely. Yeah, you can see where this is going, as well as I. Oh, well, if it's supermarkets that are infecting people, well, I guess we'll just have to close the supermarkets. Perhaps then the army or various armies can deliver MREs, meals ready to eat, to the besieged populace. COVID deaths set to double. New York implements emergency hospital measures as hospitals fill, medical reinforcements hard to find. Burned out doctors warn of catastrophe. Scientist who infected himself twice sounds alarm. World's largest vaccine maker denies a trial volunteer's illness claims. It's almost as if the media is cheering for COVID-19. Nah, come on. They are cheering, and they've been cheering since it was decided that this was the disease that was going to kill us all. That was, of course, phase 2. Phase 1 was anyone who makes a fuss about this disease from China is a xenophobe and a racist. But back to the stolen election. The lawyer, Lynn Wood, who is working hard to present evidence of electoral malfeasance, he has an interesting tweet today. Consider number of individuals and entities who worked with third-party foreign actors to attempt theft of our election. All mainstream media, Biden, Clinton, Obama, Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, Brian Kemp, and the Georgia Secretary of State, 80% of Democrats, 60% of Republicans, etc. More on Frankfurt, a rather amazing story, I have to say, that appeared over the weekend from Creative Destruction Media. Lieutenant General Thomas McEnery and Lieutenant General Michael Flynn gave interviews to the WVW broadcasting network today. It was Flynn's first interview since his pardon. In stunning testimony, McEnery stated his sources have told him U.S. Army Special Forces, possibly the famed Delta Force, raided the CIA-run server farm in Frankfurt, Germany. 5 soldiers were killed in the ensuing firefight, as well as 1 CIA paramilitary. The CIA personnel were allegedly flown in from Afghanistan for security, according to related news reports. Subsequent review of the secured servers yielded proof that China, Iran, and Russia were involved in the attempted coup against President Donald Trump, who will be shown to have won an overwhelming victory for the American people, McEnery revealed. These people have committed treason, he said. He pleaded with President Trump to not leave office until the treason is uncovered. Otherwise, America will be fatally wounded and ripe for takeover by our enemies. McEnery also stated that he believes President Trump knew this deal was coming, hence his executive order issued for sanctions for interference in our elections by foreign powers. According to his bio, McEnery was a forward air controller and fighter pilot during the Vietnam War, and had flown 407 combat missions during his 4 tours of duty. In other words, a patriot and trustworthy. Reports are now circulating that General Flynn is involved in helping the president with a private intelligence operation. And yes, is there anything to this story? Well, a Spectrum at Gab posted today, Trump's legal teams introduces first witness, Colonel Phil Waldron, to discuss Dominion systems used in Arizona. Dominion is wide open. Waldron examined the internet traffic coming from Dominion. He saw Dominion communicating with Frankfurt. Why on earth would servers in Germany have anything to do with the American election? That's quite something, wouldn't you say? This is from Gateway Pundit. Rudy Giuliani's first witness at the Arizona hearing on Monday was information warfare officer, retired Army Colonel Phil Waldron. He's an expert on automated voting machines and knows how to get in and corrupt the machines. Colonel Waldron explained that the common software in all of the systems today operating in the U.S. is a Smartmatic derivative. During his testimony on Monday, Colonel Waldron confirmed experts witnessed Dominion communicating with Frankfurt on Election Day. He also brought up SCITL connections. So we have at least one man who has testified about this. I have to say, though, that the attitude from the Biden supporters has pretty much boiled down to stop your complaining. Biden stole the election fair and square. Let's take a look at the chat. Hello, Head McNeck. Hello, Professor Paul. William Hicks. Ann says, for Trump and the good of the country, it better explode soon. William Hicks, heard they may have found more batches of votes for Biden. He may reach 90 to 100 million votes. 110? Do I hear 120 million? Gunter, TN? General Flynn versus John Brennan, DIA versus CIA. Head McNeck says, am I the only one who thinks this service story sounds like a QAnon fever dream? I heard an interview with the good general and he sounds a bit unhinged. Tricky Woo says, Drudge, what's in his blood? He sold out. Again, more on that shortly. Daniel Lutz says, never waste a good crisis. Bob Paxson, Tom Clancy is ghostwriting today's headlines. And Zedric the Heretic, hello, Kevin. Finally get to see live from Australia as I'm usually at work. Well, welcome to you. And I'm going to talk now more about the stolen elections. There's just too many variables that went for Biden. I mean, you can understand a few, but not every single one of them. You know, if you went to a store and you found that you were constantly being charged for items that you didn't buy, or that you were charged too much, or you didn't receive things that you had bought, well, you think they were stealing from you, right? Typically, the way that it works is sometimes you don't get charged for something you bought. Sometimes the error is in their favor, as well as, you know, if you get change, sometimes you get too much change, sometimes too little change, but generally it balances out. What we've seen in the American presidential election is that no, it does not balance out. So Andrea Whitberg at American Thinker writes, Americans have common sense so they can understand when they're being played. For example, when politicians place Americans under house arrest and then ignore their own rules to party and travel. And they know that there is no way on God's green earth that decrepit, demented, corrupt, and terminally stupid Joe Biden fairly won this election. This post assembles various election anomalies that don't pass the smell test. J.B. Shirk, who frequently publishes at American Thinker, wrote a knockout article for The Federalist about Joe Biden's magical performance in the election. You should read the whole article, but here are 4 things that don't pass the smell test. Biden allegedly got 80 million votes, which is more than Obama received at his peak in 2008. And Biden did this despite losing minority voters to Donald Trump and trailing Trump in voter enthusiasm. Biden broke 60 years of precedent by winning nationally, despite losing prodigiously in bellwether states and counties. The last time this happened was when the mafia got out the vote for John F. Kennedy in 1960. Trump had extraordinary coattails, so much so that even the New York Times admitted that the Democrats suffered crushing down-ballot losses across America. Think about that. Biden had no coattails and no enthusiasm, yet he allegedly won a record number of votes. Smells fetid to me. Biden barely made it through the primaries while Trump soared, with Trump's performance being a historically sure sign of voter enthusiasm and probable victory. Yet Biden again allegedly scored an equally historically strong victory. At The Spectator, Patrick Basham, a professional pollster, also felt that Biden's alleged win cannot pass the smell test. Again, this is a summary. 5, Trump exceeded his original vote count by the largest margin for any incumbent in American history. He got 10 million more votes than before. By contrast, Obama in 2012 got 3.5 million fewer votes than in 2008. 6, Trump's support among blacks grew by 50%, while Biden's fell below the important 90% mark that Democrat candidates need to secure victory. 7, in the Rust Belt, Biden lost black support everywhere except in Detroit, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee. In those cities, every single black person apparently voted for Biden. 8, while pollsters can and do manipulate polling outcomes, non-polling metrics, historical norms such as the economy, enthusiasm, etc., have never been wrong. Only we're being told that this year was the exception. Then there are the indicia of fraud that Dr. Naveed Kershavar's NIA detailed. 9, the fact that Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia simultaneously pretended to halt ballot counting while continuing to count is evidence of election fraud collusion. 10, optical scanners were set to accept unverified, unvalidated ballots. 11, the scanners were almost certainly programmed to fail to keep audit records. 12, in the contested states, the voting machines were alleged to have processed hundreds of thousands of ballots within a short time, which is a physical impossibility. And here are a few more indications of fraud. In Pennsylvania, statistically impossible numbers of late arriving mail-in votes went to Biden. 14, Dominion and ES and S voting machines were created to have backdoors and specific functions to manipulate votes either at the machine or over the internet. 15, Fox News' behavior on election night, refusing to call pro-Trump outcomes while prematurely calling Arizona for Biden, was so abnormal that Vegas odd makers instantly assumed that the fix was in. 16, the allegedly late arriving mailed-in ballots increased Biden's equally alleged lead with statistically impossible perfection and stability. 17, there were anomalies in Virginia that suggested that computers were subtracting votes from Trump and sometimes giving them to Biden. 18, one analysis shows that voting machines in Michigan systematically removed votes from Trump and handed them to Biden. I saw a rebuttal, which I cannot locate now, that purported to debunk this, but did so by using a different scale on the x-axis, which I found inherently suspicious. 19, over 100,000 Pennsylvania absentee ballots were returned either a day after they were mailed out, on the day they were mailed out, or on the day before they were mailed out. 20, in all the contested areas and at Dominion's website, Democrats have been systematically failing to create or have destroyed all data that could be used to demonstrate fraud. This creates the legal presumption that the data do, in fact, show fraud. On behalf of all Trump voters, I say to the Democrats who are trying to gaslight us, don't spit in my face and tell me it's raining. Hang on just a second. It was actually sunny today. We got some sun on Saturday, but it's been pretty much uninterrupted gloom outside. So I didn't have this light above the monitor on at first because it was unusually bright in this room. This is from Christina Lila at the Gateway Pundit. President Trump's personal lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and Trump campaign senior legal advisor, Jenna Ellis, appeared before Arizona state lawmakers in a public hearing Monday. Rudy Giuliani's first witness at the Arizona hearing on Monday was information warfare officer, retired Army Colonel Phil Waldron. Recall, Colonel Waldron also testified before the Pennsylvania Senate majority last week on the election fraud, huge ballot spikes for Joe Biden, and Dominion voting systems. On Monday, Waldron confirmed experts witnessed Dominion communicating with Frankfurt on Election Day. The Dominion voting machines were hooked up to the internet and completely open to hackers. Colonel Waldron spoke on how vulnerable Dominion is to hackers, and the crowd gasped. He said votes in the Dominion voting system can be changed by an authorized user or an unauthorized user hacker. Your vote is not as secure as your Venmo account, Waldron said, referring to a mobile payment service. And let's move on to Georgia. From the USA Herald today, Marlvick Several Summers, Georgia governor election chief ordered to explain their opposition to suit demanding inspection of voting machines. A federal judge ordered Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to respond to former Trump campaign lawyer Sidney Powell's lawsuit demanding an inspection of Dominion voting machines. President Trump repeatedly claimed that the Dominion voting machines switched votes in favor of Biden. Powell claimed in her lawsuit that the voting machines were of a massive election fraud scheme involving Democratic-run cities, billionaire George Soros, and communist money from Venezuela and Cuba. On Sunday night, U.S. District Judge Timothy Batten Jr. issued a temporary order stopping local officials' plans to reset the Dominion voting machines used in Cherokee, Cobb, and Gwinnett counties. The election results in these counties favored President-elect Joe Biden. Defendants are hereby enjoined and restrained from altering, destroying, or erasing, or allowing the alteration, destruction, or erasure of any software or data on any Dominion voting machine in Cobb, Gwinnett, and Cherokee counties, ordered Batten. Judge Batten stated that Kemp and Raffensperger have until Wednesday to file a brief explaining their opposition to Powell's demand for 3 forensic inspections. Dominion voting machines in Georgia. Apparently they're 88% through their recount, and then supposedly it crashed. But now there are later stories saying that it wasn't a crash, that the voting machines that a voting machine disappeared. At this point, I don't know. What we heard about the pipe bursting, no evidence of any water. It's just one crazy excuse after another. Again, this is from Cassandra Fairbanks at Gateway Pundit. Native Americans in Arizona were provided with electronics, resort stays, and monetary gifts in exchange for registering to vote or actually voting at events that were also promoting Joe Biden. Any monetary exchange for votes, whether partisan or not, is illegal. As the Gateway Pundit previously reported, the Nevada Native Vote Project used gift cards, electronics, and other gifts to bribe Native Americans to register to vote. In Arizona, Biden and Mark Kelly signs were prominently displayed during events offering giveaways. The Pascua Yaqui tribe of Arizona were treated to giveaways of resort stays, golf outings, Fitbits, tablets, television, sound bars, and more on September 22nd. The giveaways continued in October. There was also straight-up cash being handed out to voters by Corazon, Arizona, which is a project of Neighborhood Ministries, Inc., a 501c3 nonprofit. Some lucky natives were also treated to $50 Visa gift cards from the United National Indian Tribal Youth, Inc. As you have probably guessed, the Gateway Pundit is not very happy with the governor of Georgia and the Secretary of State. Jim Hoft writes today, corrupt Georgia Governor Brian Kemp and Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger are to blame for the stolen presidential election in Georgia. Both Republican officials worked overtime to assure Democrats were able to steal the state for Joe Biden. Trump won Georgia in 2016 by 5 points. In every single state, Trump picked up votes in his historic landslide in 2020. But in Georgia, the state's top GOP officials assured the vote would be stolen by Democrats. Raffensperger even had Dominion Voting Systems Antifa executive Eric Coomer, yes, that is his actual name, come testify for him weeks before the election. Thanks to Raffensperger, Democrats were able to shut down vote counting and then dump tens of thousands of ballots to steal the state for Joe Biden. Last week, Raffensperger announced he will throw the election to Democrats once again. Raffensperger will once again allow drop boxes for ballot harvesters and extended mail-in voting. This assures Democrat cheating in the Peach State. The Democrat candidates can now take off a couple of months, hide in the basement like Joe Biden, and then celebrate their big wins in January. Georgia signed a compliance order with Stacey Abrams, who was the candidate who lost the race for governor 2 years ago to Brian Kemp. And this consent order basically allowed all of the vote cheating. And I have to wonder, what does Stacey Abrams have on Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger? Pictures of them in blackface wearing Nazi uniforms? Something like that? This is from WTMA.com. Claims that Dominion Voting Systems rigged the presidential election against President Donald Trump are untrue and flat out bizarre. The company's CEO, John Poulos, writes in an opinion piece Monday in the Wall Street Journal. Poulos takes on claims by Trump's legal team that the company is under foreign influence and capable of flipping votes through algorithms. Lawyers arguing the president's case, especially Sidney Powell, have claimed that Dominion was created for the purpose of rigging elections for former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez. Poulos counters that he created Dominion in Canada, but that it has no ties to Venezuela, nor is it connected to Chavez. Dominion is an American company, now headquartered in Denver. Dominion is not and has never been a front for communists, he writes. It has no ties to Hugo Chavez, the late dictator of Venezuela. It has never been involved in Venezuelan elections. None of Dominion's systems use the Smartmatic software that has come under attack, as any state certification lab could verify. The purpose of Dominion machines, he says, is to produce a paper ballot, which can be used as a backup, which was done in the Georgia hand recount. In the counties in Pennsylvania that were contested, Philadelphia and Allegheny, he noted Dominion machines weren't even used. In fact, across the 14 Pennsylvania counties that used Dominion systems, President Trump received 52.2% of the vote. Yes, Dominion apparently became an American company in a real hurry. That their office in Toronto was, which it shares with a George Soros affiliated company, was shut down suddenly after the election. All perfectly coincidental, I'm sure. But again, when I find out that, machine crashes during a recount, I don't know, I get a little suspicious. The Daily Mail reported today that Dominion Voting Systems server crashes during election recount in Georgia's largest county with 88% of votes counted. Fulton County election officials said the counting process was nearly complete before the server crashed, according to local outlet 11 Alive. Election workers responsible for counting the votes had already concluded the counting of absentee, early in-person, and provisional ballots. Trump has criticized the Dominion Voting Systems electoral software in many states, making unfounded claims that thousands of votes had been moved to Biden's campaign. Well, you can see it on TV with people on CNN, election analysts gasping when they saw the changed numbers. Okay. Yes, we've already talked about the district judge's decision. Okay. And Raffensperger is not very happy that he has become famous or infamous. This is from USA Today. Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger pushed back Monday at new conspiracy theories spread by President Donald Trump's allies as the state prepares to finish its second recount of the presidential election this week. Truth matters, especially around election administration. Raffensperger, a Republican who is under fire from the president, said before announcing that officials are on schedule to finish the latest recount by the end of Wednesday. President-elect Joe Biden won Georgia and its 16 electoral votes, an outcome reaffirmed by an initial hand audit ordered by the Secretary of State that found that Biden won by 12,284 votes. The Trump campaign requested a second-hand recount after the election was certified. Raffensperger, who has stressed that he voted for Trump, said voters should have confidence in the recount results despite the massive amounts of misinformation that is being spread by dishonest actors. Well, I don't trust anyone who uses this term, misinformation. That is a leftist term referring to claims or even facts with which they disagree. Back in 2016, National Review magazine, I suppose, reached a kind of nadir when they had a special issue devoted to Never Trump. But they may have topped themselves today with an editorial from the editors, Trump's disgraceful endgame. What are you going to say? Cuck's gonna cuck. President Trump said the other day that he'd leave office if he loses the vote of the Electoral College on December 14th. This is not the kind of assurance presidents of the United States typically need to make, but it was noteworthy given Trump's disgraceful conduct since losing his bid for re-election to Joe Biden November 3rd. Behind in almost all the major polls, yeah, it's not as if this wasn't a psyop. Biden up by 14%. Behind in almost all the major polls, Trump stormed within a hair's breadth in the key battlegrounds of winning re-election, and his unexpectedly robust performance helped put Republicans in a strong position for the post-Trump presidency era. Yes, Trump is out, but the Republicans, yay, Republicans are what? They're going to go back to shilling for Wall Street and starting pointless, stupid, endless wars. President can't stand to admit that he lost, and so has insisted since the wee hours of election night that he really won and won by a lot. There are legitimate issues to consider after the 2020 vote about the security of mail-in ballots and the process of counting votes. Some jurisdictions, bizarrely, take weeks to complete their initial count, but make no mistake. The chief driver of the post-election contention of the past several weeks is the petulant refusal of one man to accept the verdict of the American people. The Trump team and much of the GOP is working backwards, desperately trying to find something, anything, to support the president's aggrieved feelings, rather than objectively considering the evidence and reacting as warranted. Almost nothing that the Trump team has alleged has withstood the slightest scrutiny. In particular, it's hard to find much that is remotely true in the president's Twitter feed these days. It is full of already debunked claims and crackpot conspiracy theories about Dominion voting systems. Over the weekend, he repeated the charge that 1.8 million mail-in ballots in Pennsylvania were mailed out, yet 2.6 million were ultimately tallied. In a rather elementary error, this compares the number of mail-in ballots requested in the primary to the number of ballots counted in the general. Flawed and dishonest assertions like this pollute the public discourse and mislead good people who made the mistake of believing things said by the President of the United States. So apparently no one on the editorial board of National Review finds nothing odd in the fact that counting stopped at the same time in several states, and then after the Republican observers went home, just a bunch of Democrats mysteriously found millions of votes for Joe Biden, and were expected to believe that, oh, they count the votes separately. They don't count the ballots and, X for Trump and Y for Biden. No, they just delivered hundreds of thousands at a time of votes for Joe Biden, with Trump getting none. They don't consider anything mysterious about the fact that, as mentioned earlier, apparently 100% of blacks in certain American cities voted for Joe Biden. I mean, I could go on. I'll just mention one more. The down ballot. Oh, So all of these people, we have all of these people voting for Joe Biden, but voting for no other Democrats. That the Republicans pick up, a dozen or more House seats, and no, but Trump loses. That the Republican Party is more popular than Donald Trump? No, no. None of this makes sense. National Review continues. The idea is the Trump team stalwartly maintains that the Supreme Court is going to take up this case and issue a game-changing ruling is fantastical. Conservative judges have consistently rejected Trump's flailing legal appeals, and the justices are unlikely to have a different reaction. Trump's most reprehensible tactic has been to attempt, somewhat shamefacedly, to get local Republican officials to block the certification of votes and state legislatures to appoint Trump electors in clear violation of the public will. This has gone nowhere thanks to the honesty and sense of duty of most of the Republicans involved. But it's a profoundly undemocratic move that we hope no losing presidential candidate ever even thinks of again. Getting defeated in a national election is a blow to the ego of even the most thick-skinned politicians and inevitably engenders personal feelings of bitterness and anger. What America has long expected is that losing candidates swallow those feelings and at least pretend to be gracious. If Trump's not capable of it, he should at least stop waging war on the outcome. Did Al Gore admit defeat on election night in the year 2000, or the day after, or the week after, or 2 weeks after? No, he did not. Strange that National Review doesn't mention this. When Stacey Abrams was narrowly beaten for governor by Brian Kemp, did she graciously acknowledge her loss? No, she did not. She claimed and continued to claim for months afterwards that she was the real governor of Georgia. And somehow this does not appear in the National Review editorial as well. As I say, they think it's good times again. That the Republicans can go back to selling out Americans for the Chamber of Commerce and for communist China. And I don't know, maybe America will get into a war with Iran. They could call it the John McCain Memorial War. Remember him? Bomb, 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 Iran. Yeah, that guy. Let's go back to the chat here. Carter Williams says, National Review's editor-in-chief looks like a ghoul. That's funny. William Buckley appointed him as his successor on the proviso that he style himself Richard and not Rich Lowry. After he became editor, Lowry continued to style himself as Rich. Apparently, it's a point of pride with him for some reason. Obama says it's snowing in Ohio, but he says hello to you too. Justin Proto says, didn't Trump just change the chain of command for special ops? Indeed, he did. Jim Bowden says, I am a lawyer in Balmain. It has to be what? Sustainable if we say so. Lawyer from Balmain on top of that, says Zedric the Heretic. If you weren't here with KMG, I'd have some very prejudiced thoughts about you. I don't know exactly what that means. Wandering Spurg says KMG pluralizing data like a boss. Okay. Again, from Justin Proto, a bit off topic, but I've heard that Russian intel is back using typewriters. I don't know. I suppose since what the assumption is that everything that is communicated on the internet is intercepted by one intelligence service, or probably several. Again, from Jim Bowden, I understand I'm surrounded by neo-Marxist Trotsky indoctrinated mob. I'm the only one who asked for forgiveness from the Austrian artist born near Linz. Let's see. Zedric the Heretic says, I'm a crane driver from Newcastle. I like to stay working class and based in reality. Balmain, Jim Bowden explains, is a trendy suburb of Sydney where a lot of professional retired left-wing in-crowd live. Okay. Hikmah Warrior. Okay, a little private conversation going on there. More about National Review. Let's see. Ricardo Williams says Rich Lowry is suffering without access to adrenochrome. Oh dear, oh dear. I'm getting AIDS from listening to this garbage, says Ann Run. Happy St. Andrew's Day to all, says Matthew Carpenter. Why are effete libtard males so terrified of COVID? Says Hikmah Warrior. I don't know. Bad conscience, perhaps? Uncle Sam has his eyes closed and his fingers in his ears saying, la, 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 can't hear you, says Metatron. Okay. We got a clap from Gerald Perry, says looking sharp. Why, thank you. Snowing in Georgia as well, says Head McNeck. Of course, when you look at Stacey Abrams almost being elected governor of Georgia, I'm thinking, okay, so we have a snaggle-toothed, morbidly obese, angry, closeted black lesbian, which is exactly the sort of candidate that you expect would go down gangbusters in Georgia. Gerard Perry says, a lot of folks in my church are suffering from COVID at the moment. A lady here married to one of our deacons could use some prayers. She's in the hospital. So is Maria Bartiromo going to be canceled? This is from Mediaite. Fox News anchor Maria Bartiromo expressed outrage on Sunday as President Donald Trump leveled a series of baseless allegations of voter fraud in support of the outlandish conspiracy theory that the election was stolen from him. Bartiromo, whose network Fox News has called the race for Joe Biden, landed the first interview with Trump since he lost re-election. The lengthy phone conversation, which came as top Republicans prepare for a Biden administration and the Trump administration begins the transition, focused almost entirely on Trump's claims that the election was stolen through fraud. A dizzying series of false claims and conspiracy theories were mounted by Trump and Bartiromo throughout the interview, ranging from allegations that the FBI and Justice Department were involved in the stolen election to claims that the election was rigged through voting machines. Here's a question. If it can be demonstrated that a server farm in Frankfurt, Germany, was involved in the American election, let alone that it was, these voting machines were connected to the internet, would that be enough for these people to consider any of Trump's claims? We won the election easily. That's not the way Joe Biden got 80 million votes. There's no way Joe Biden beat Barack Obama in the black communities of various cities. Trump said this election was a fraud. It was a rigged election. This is disgusting, Bartiromo exclaimed in response, and we cannot allow America's election to be corrupted. While many on the news side at Fox have rejected the president's claims as baseless, Bartiromo has remained a loyal supporter of Trump in the weeks after his loss. The Fox anchor has granted ample airtime to conspiracy theories that he won the election until the race was stolen through mass fraud, a claim that has been rejected by Republican lawmakers and Trump-appointed judges. Conspiracy theories, they're always wrong. They're always the result of evil, demented people. Like that conspiracy theory that the governments of the United States and Great Britain made up claims that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction in order to justify an invasion. Can you imagine people saying that? Yes, the San Francisco the Washington Post seems to have taken notice of Maria Bartiromo as well, and look for a move to have this woman taken off the air. It's from Jeff Poor at Breitbart. During an interview on Fox News Channel Sunday Morning Futures, Trump President Trump attacked the media for its unwillingness to cover stories that could cast Joe Biden's candidacy and his presidential chances in a negative way. Trump called it suppression by the press. Talking with Maria Bartiromo, the media doesn't want to talk about it. They know how fraudulent this is. It's no different than Hunter. It's no different than Hunter. They don't want to talk about Hunter, so they totally closed it off, big tech in the media, other than the New York Post, as you remember, which took a lot of heat. It was terminated. It was terminated from, I guess, Twitter, maybe Facebook. But it's a situation the likes of which we don't have freedom of press in this country. We have suppression by the press. They suppress. You can't have a scandal if nobody reports about it. This is the greatest fraud in the history of our country from an electoral standpoint. And I guess you could build it up bigger than an electoral stand. What's bigger from an electoral standpoint? What is bigger than this? This is the essence of our country. This is the whole ball game. And they cheated. Speaking of suppression of the press, this is from Alana Mastrangelo at Breitbart. Facebook fact checker PolitiFact was forced to issue a correction after conservative commentator Candace Owens challenged the false rating tacked on to a recent video she posted about former Vice President Joe Biden. Correction, PolitiFact originally labeled this video false in our capacity as a third-party fact checker for Facebook, PolitiFact announced last week. On November the 20th, an appeal to that decision was made on behalf of Ms. Owens. PolitiFact approved the appeal on November 20th, determined that a correction was appropriate, and removed the false rating. Anyone who understands politics, who passed a basic level of civics, knows that right now, in this moment, Joe Biden is literally and legally not the president-elect, said Owens in her video that was falsely fact-checked by PolitiFact. This information cannot be fact-checked because that is the truth, so they cannot take that off. They cannot censor that. It's a fact, continued Owens in her video. In August, Owens announced that she would be suing Facebook over its blatant censorship after the social media platform demonetized her page following her comments about Senator Kamala Harris swearing into Congress in 2017 as an Indian American. I'm so excited that we get to watch Kamala Harris, who swore into Congress as an Indian American, now play the I'm a black woman card all the way until November. Owens had quipped on social media, fun times. Let's see what, okay. This is from Vox Day. Rumors and more rumors, as seen on Twitter and poll. DC insider Gina Haspel, CIA director, found dead from natural causes. I have no confirmation of this. A shock at Langley right now, as this is circulated around DC about an hour ago. Now it's going viral in government circles, but there is currently a strict news blackout. What an untimely and unfortunate coincidence that would be, Vox Day says, assuming it were true, and just before the holidays, too. I'd seen the rumors floating around Poll that she'd been killed or wounded in the Frankfurt raid, but as there are no sources, and it seemed rather unlikely that she would have been in Germany for Thanksgiving, I elected not to mention them. But this sounds a little more credible, especially given the way in which she'd been summoned to McConnell's office last week. Question, is being Epsteined considered a natural cause? Arizona, as evidence of fraud is presented at the Arizona hearing, the Secretary of State certifies the election. Vox Day comments, that's a bold move, Cotton. We'll see how it turns out for them. What evidence of fraud? If you're on Social Galactic, you may recall that I wrote this 1 week ago on November the 23rd. Here is the smoking gun. A single example of an internet packet containing election data being transmitted to a server outside the United States. That's it. That's all the evidence that is required to blow apart all the skeptics' denials. And what came out in the Arizona hearing today? The testimony of one U.S. Army Colonel, Phil Waldron, a cybersecurity expert. Spiderfoot reconnaissance tool tracked Dominion voting systems, revealing vulnerabilities, volumetric traffic, and web server coordinates, confirming it was connected to the internet. Packet traffic was observed from U.S. to Frankfurt. Specifically, to a Seitel server in Frankfurt, Germany, done, demolished, and dusted. And again, one final thing from Vox Day. It appears that little post-election update Dominion did on its GA servers might not have been thoroughly tested. This is devolving into pure comedy now. It keeps getting better. The server didn't crash. It's been reported missing. Scott Atlas retires from the White House. And let's see this. Kayleigh McEnery slaps down the Washington Post. President real Donald Trump already has an all-female senior White House press team. So does the vice president. So does the first lady. So does the second lady. The completely discredited Washington Post once again reveals their blinding propagandist fake news proclivities. In the Washington Post story is attached, Biden chooses an all-female senior White House press team. Maybe they could go further than this. Maybe they could claim that there were, no women in the cabinet until Joe Biden appointed them. And, okay, let's see. Governor Cuomo, okay. I'm going to have something to say about him in a few minutes. Arizona witness truckloads of ballots kept coming in for 10 days after federal officials thought they were done counting votes. There's an easy way to prevent this from happening. It's really, really easy. And that is that people vote on Election Day and Election Day only. And they vote on paper ballots, which are then secured, counted by hand, and then secured in case of a recount. Given that American presidential election dates are known into infinity, the only people who should be allowed to vote remotely, absentee ballots, are those serving in the military and U.S. diplomatic personnel. There's no possible excuse for this new practice of early voting. I'm sure that some voters' minds were swayed by the stories about Hunter Biden, but if you'd already cast your vote, then it was too late, wasn't it? Okay. Liberty One has landed. DNS server switch activated. Welcome to CTH 2.0. Okay. Oh, yes, the conservative treehouse was being threatened with being tossed off the internet. Trump in Arizona. We're going to win this thing. We're not giving up. We're taking it all the way. Democratic Senate candidate Ossoff pushes for one-party rule during pandemic crisis. How about that? The most important political contest in the United States will take place on January 5th, 2020. This is from the National File by Frank Salvato. In the state of Georgia, where two runoff elections will determine who represents that state in the U.S. Senate, but they will also decide whether the United States succumbs to one-party rule. The January 5th runoff elections pit incumbent Senator Kelly Loeffler against a pro-Black theology progressive, the Reverend Raphael Warnock, and incumbent Senator David Perdue, who is running against failed Democrat U.S. congressional candidate and independent filmmaker John Ossoff. In a recent interview with CNN, Ossoff telegraphed the overall goal of the 2020 Democrat campaign platform, one-party rule. Ossoff said that if Republicans remain in the majority in the Senate, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell would effect paralysis at a time of crisis. We all know what's going to happen if McConnell holds the Senate. He will try to do to Joe Biden and Kamala Harris just like he tried to do to President Barack Obama. Ossoff said it will be paralysis, partisan trench warfare, obstructionism as far as the eye can see at a moment of crisis when we need strong action. The crisis Ossoff was referring to is the COVID epidemic. And I'm going to check in here. Okay. Let's go to Scott Adams, see what he has to say. 11 hours ago, he tweeted, Senator Rand Paul had tweeted, interesting, Trump margin of defeat in 4 states occurred in 4 data dumps between 1:34 and 6:31 a.m. Statistical anomaly, fraud. Look at the evidence and decide for yourself. That is, if big tech allows you to read this. Anomalies in vote counts And Twitter has added, this claim about election fraud is disputed. Adams commented, we are starting to see the good stuff now. Are data anomalies enough to show the election was probably stolen? I don't know. But watch how this argument never makes it to CNN. That's your dog not barking. Scott Adams is a Trump supporter. Guy Spire had tweeted, that means that a lot of people will tune him out just for that. Don't. It would be a mistake. He's got some really valuable ideas to share. And let's see if there's anything interesting at KG, boss of Breezewood. Breaking, articles of impeachment filed against Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. That's from Breaking 911. And I see he's retweeted the Babylon Bee. Biden's arm falls off while trying to open a jar of peanut butter. Staffers have revealed that Biden was the victim of yet another tragic accident after his arm completely fell off as he attempted to open up a jar of peanut butter. Yeah, it just literally fell off, said one aide, confirming this story. I walked into the kitchen, and there was his arm just lying on the floor. Mr. Biden didn't seem to notice it was gone. I'm told that this is a normal occurrence for people his age, so everything's fine. Once Biden noticed his arm was on the floor, he bent over to pick it up, and his nose fell off. Aides rushed in to wrestle the confused Biden to the floor and take him to the hospital for reassembly. Nothing to see here, insisted a spokesperson. Biden will be calling a lid during his 2-week recovery time and looks forward to reappearing to take charge of the country and defeat the virus. Unfortunately, Biden's recovery has been extended one more week after his head fell off as he tried to climb in the ambulance. Again, that's from the Babylon Bee. See what J5 Killer has to say. Brad the Great had tweeted, notice how Trump's legal team keeps saying they have plenty of compelling evidence of massive amounts of federal election fraud. You know why they keep saying that? Well, I'll tell you. They keep saying that because they do have compelling evidence of massive fraud. Razor Fist had tweeted, I don't know who needs to hear this, but not a single county in the entire country has yet held a proper audit of the mail-in vote. Breaking, Arizona hearing. This is from Natty Lee. Are you willing to say under oath that you've seen the connection to the internet, that you've seen it gone offshore to Frankfurt, Germany? Colonel Waldron, yes. Our white hat hackers, they have that traffic and the packet. And there is a tweet storm from Zoltan Physics, which he is at @NoClutchTruth, which is quite informative. People seem confused by the lawsuit filed in Georgia. It isn't that difficult to understand when explained plainly. I want to try and do that for you. Important, some judges take their oaths to execute laws written very seriously. They execute that duty with integrity. All conspiracies and assumptions about Judge Batten aside, he appears to understand not only what is at stake, but how meticulous this all must be. He was correct to reverse the original decision based on jurisdiction, with the understanding that the plaintiffs did not name election officials being brought in as parties. For the purposes of discovery, gathering evidence, the question of possession and authority comes into play. Election authority comes down to counties. Those counties technically have possession of the evidence. In order to rule on judgment against them for the purpose of discovery, they would have to be named in the lawsuit. In essence, the judge has no authority over these county officials because they aren't specifically named. By law, that is his duty. Don't be mad. He actually paved the way. Oh, yes, more about Joe Biden. Tyler Durden at Zero Hedge had reported on Sunday, presumptive President-elect Joe Biden slipped and twisted his ankle Saturday while playing with his dog, which coincidentally telepathically told a British psychic that the 78-year-old former vice president would make a great president. Per Biden's office, quote, on Saturday, November 28th, President-elect Biden slipped while playing with his dog Major and twisted his ankle. Out of an abundance of caution, he will be examined this afternoon by an orthopedist. Twisted his ankle. Did he? Wrestling with a dog? Sounds likely. But apparently he didn't twist his ankle. Again, from Christina Lila Gateway Pundit. 78-year-old Joe Biden supposedly slipped and twisted his ankle while playing with his German Shepherd named Major on Saturday. Biden was examined by an orthopedist on Sunday, where he got a CT scan for detailed imaging. Joe Biden's team tried to block the media by maneuvering a press van so that reporters and photographers couldn't see Biden as he entered the building. One photog captured feeble Biden as he hobbled out of the orthopedic office. Now this, Biden fractured his midfoot and will likely require a walking boot for several weeks. This is just to warn you that you are not going to get any accurate information from the mainstream media about the health of Joe Biden. You might remember that when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, she supposedly slipped and fell and smacked her head. Now, her husband, Bill Clinton, later said that she had been, out of it for something like 3 months because she smacked her head. Did she suffer a concussion? The official White House spokespeople said no, she did not suffer a concussion. They also said that she had not been taken to the hospital. How would they know whether she had suffered a concussion or not without a brain scan or any of the other protocols which are used to determine concussion? It seemed likely to me at the time that Hillary Clinton had very likely suffered a stroke or something similar. But no, she tripped and fell. And again, somehow this means that she's largely incapacitated for 3 months afterwards. What's up with Matt Drudge? Armin Rosen has a fascinating story. A tablet mag, Matt Drudge logs off. The Drudge Report has become a conformist shadow of its formerly bratty oppositional self. Why? It begins. It was the kind of story that once would have had Matt Drudge deploying font sizes that newspapers used to reserve for declarations of war. On October 14th, Twitter and Facebook blocked users from spreading a New York Post article alleging that Hunter Biden had brokered meetings between his father, then the Vice President of the United States, and executives at a Ukrainian energy firm where the younger Biden held an $80,000 a month sinecure. The Post article included photos of what appeared to be an exhausted and intoxicating-looking Hunter Biden in various states of undress. Yet the controversy over tech companies restricting the spread of a story unflattering to the Democratic presidential contender was nowhere to be seen in the upper half of the Drudge Report, once the most coveted and agenda-setting real estate in right-of-center media. Record turnout alarms Republicans. Biden +7 Georgia screamed the top headlines on October 15th. People have noticed that Drudge has basically become a liberal site over the past 2 years, a senior figure in conservative media told me last week. Liberal might be a stretch, but it's hard to argue with the claim that the Drudge Report has changed over the past few years. At the very least, it became an anti-Trump site. You're fired. The top story on Drudge read, November 7th, when Joe Biden's Electoral College win was first projected, appearing above a full page of links celebrating the former vice president's victory. Drudge screenshotted the headline in a rare tweet that same day. During the campaign, the site had touted any and all bad news for Drudge's once preferred candidate and sometimes host at the White House, a fact that didn't go unnoticed by the media critic-in-chief. Our people have all left Drudge, the president tweeted September 14th. He is a confused mess. Drudge has always been an enigma, but aspects of Trump critique appear to be accurate. The Drudge Report once cycled through 40 to 50 links in a single 5-hour period. The page is now updated only once or twice a day and almost never reacts to breaking news, as if it's being run by someone who simply doesn't care anymore. Traffic has reportedly lagged, with ComScore data suggesting a 45% plunge in the year before this past September. In the glory days, even a mid-page Drudge link could pull 1 million views. That number is now down to the high tens of thousands. Drudge pulled the report's app from Apple's and Google's app stores, only to later link to it in the Drudge sidebar after switching ad brokers without explanation in mid-2019. And unlike in past years, when the page had multiple staffers working morning and afternoon shifts, Drudge watchers have no idea who, if anyone, works for the site. The last reported employee was Daniel Halper, a former Weekly Standard editor hired on in 2017, though it is unclear whether he still works there. When reached by tablet, Halper would not comment on any past or current involvement with the Drudge Report. In interviews with over a half dozen various former Drudge associates, about half suggested that the site may no longer be under his control. For these people, politics alone couldn't explain all the changes at the site. The humor, the oddball stories about sex robots and exorcisms, and the obsession with weather events are almost entirely gone, along with any pretense to original reporting. This is a long and detailed story. It would appear that control of the Drudge Report is now vested in Mountain View, California. And the story goes into considerable detail about shenanigans involving the Drudge page refreshing in order to boost the number of views. It's one thing for a page to refresh if new things have been added to it. But if it's the same page, refreshing every 5 minutes or so, which the Drudge Report page does, it seems a lot like cheating. There's a suggestion made that Matt Drudge is rather like Ann Coulter, that they feel that they have been ill-treated, neglected, etc. Armenia gets a look in. Also, the Deccan Herald, the daily newspaper of Karnataka, a state in southwestern India, shares some 40 direct advertising ID numbers with Drudge, to take just one of the numerous examples. I asked Lucienne Goldberg if Drudge's old friends ever speculate about where he might be gone, she said. Not gone in the sense of dead, she quickly clarified. Gone in the sense of finished with his old life. I think he was a little surprised he made it as far as he did, and that he was, quote, important to the general press scene as he was. He had a cool operation. He didn't have to work very hard, went swimming once a day in the ocean, and liked going to parties. And he liked his hat. Maybe Drudge decided he was sick of it all, and perhaps this was a wise move. Right-of-center media can be a bestiary of lightning rods and public villains. Former Breitbart chief Steve Bannon is under indictment on allegations of tax fraud. Tucker Carlson is subject to a nearly full-on advertiser boycott, despite having the highest-rated show on cable. 25 years into his career, Drudge, by having effectively disappeared, has become an object of fascination rather than scorn. Lucienne Goldberg says, I don't think he had any politics at all. Drudge grasped the potential of the internet before almost anyone else in publishing. We are entering an era vibrating with the din of small voices, a smirking Drudge told the National Press Club during an infamous 1998 appearance. Any citizen can be a reporter. Maybe Drudge is undertaking one of his boldest moves of all, one that will hopefully prove as pioneering as his belief in the flattening effects of web media. Whether through a payday, political apathy, or a newfound slackerdom, Drudge might have actually pulled off everyone's dream, making bank and then logging off. It's true enough, that there's very little that's interesting on Drudge's site anymore. And I used to go there, as a great many people did, that, you'd heard that something was happening. So you go to Drudge to, look for stories. But as the writer at the tablet explained, the site is simply never updated to reflect breaking news. Are we going to have Christmas this year? Apparently it's going to be a dark winter. That's the phrase that our politicians keep using. Seems to be a war on religion going on in the West. This is from BBC News. Police stormed into a church broadcast and incorrectly told the minister he was to be prosecuted for breaking COVID regulations. Officials attended Kingdom Faith Ministries International Church in Milton Keynes last week after reports of loud music. The pastor was told too many staff were running the online service, forcing it to stop, a church spokesman said. Thames Valley Police said there was a misunderstanding and apologized. The Reverend Daniel Mattiola was holding a legal broadcast service in the church to 150 online members of his congregation When 2 police officers arrived at the building on November 20th, the Christian Legal Center said the officers claimed there were too many people supporting the broadcast and demanded they leave. And let's see what's going on in Canada in that respect. Canada is not going to be second to Britain in terms of persecuting Christian churches. This is from Paul Joseph Watson at Summit News. A CBC News journalist posted a video to Twitter bragging about how she ratted out worshippers who attended a church service in British Columbia in violation of COVID rules. I counted more than 60 people inside this church in Chilliwack, a bold breach of PHO orders to suspend gatherings due to record high COVID cases, tweeted Georgina Smith. Another church nearby was visited by RCMP. Unfortunately, both religious leaders declined to speak with us on camera. The video shows Smith parked some distance from the church as she counts every single person to leave the building, including children playing in the parking lot. Smith made clear her intention was to get the churchgoers persecuted for worshiping our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ by retweeting a bunch of stories about other churches in the area being fined by the Corona cops, pointed out Chris Menahan. The tweet once again underscores how journalists now see it as their role as publicly shaming people who dare to transgress draconian rules or deplatforming anyone who uses social media networks to dissent against them. Last week, another Canadian journalist stalked a small restaurant in Ontario that had kept its doors open in defiance of COVID rules. Owner Adam Skelly was subsequently handcuffed, arrested, and later banned from social media. Journalism is dead, with many now reduced to scratching out a living by acting as Stasi-like informants on behalf of giant corporations or the state. A woman called Alicia Corbella writes for the Calgary Herald. She used to be the editorial page editor of that newspaper. And one would think that the editorial page editor of a major newspaper would be an intelligent person. But I've known of this woman's writing for a long time, and she is one of the dimmest people in journalism, left or right. Her column, "With our rights come responsibilities, wear a mask." And right off the bat, I'm laughing at this. Our rights? What rights? All our rights have been suspended by governments. When will they be given back to us? Who knows? Maybe never. And the media cheered this on and continues to cheer it on. She begins, "Our rights and responsibilities are two sides of the same coin. In a free and democratic society, one cannot exist without the other." Well, it's not a free and democratic society, Canada. Not anymore. It appears anti-maskers have forgotten that. These people spend a lot of time demanding their right to assemble with as many people as they want or to walk into any store or government office while not wearing a mask during the deadly COVID-19 pandemic. But you never hear them mention their responsibility to care for others. One of the best expressions of the inextricable link between rights and responsibilities was penned by John D. Rockefeller, the world's first billionaire and a renowned philanthropist. He's one heck of a guy, John D. Rockefeller, and not a robber baron or anything like that. "I believe that every right implies a responsibility, every opportunity an obligation, every possession a duty," wrote Rockefeller in a profound bit of prose that can be read on a plaque in front of Rockefeller Center in New York City. "If you want to exercise the right to liberty, you are responsible to not break any laws that will land you in jail where you will lose your liberty. In other words, your rights have limits because they are linked to your responsibilities to others." How about the rights of latrine wallahs, health bureaucrats? Are they going to accept any responsibility for destroying Canada's economy, for destroying Canadian society? I don't think so. Corbella continues, "Sadly, there have been numerous examples, including here of Calgary, of entitled, spoiled, center of the universe people being asked to wear a mask inside a store only to then tee off on some store clerk making minimum wage. The solution is actually very simple. If you don't want to wear a mask, don't walk into a store where it's required that you wear one. Stay home or stay outside. You're not allowed to buy anything anymore. Because in my province, which is not alone in this, masks must be worn in all indoor locations. Corbella continues, what's really astonishing is hearing about this kind of attitude existing in some churches, albeit mostly in the US. It's good to know Canadian churches wouldn't get up to any of that stuff, demanding that their congregations can worship God. The Canadians know better than that. Let's see, touting their right to their freedom of religion and right of assembly, but saying nothing at all about love of neighbor, which is central to the ethic of what Christianity is all about. Well, if you don't need church services, why do you need churches? As Hank Hill once said, after he had joined a megachurch and it was explained to him all the amenities associated with it, and he said, why don't I just go to the mall and think about Jesus? James Patton, the head pastor of First Alliance Church, a large congregation whose main building off Deerfoot and Barlow Trails in Calgary Southeast can seat 3,500 people, posted a notice online informing congregants that the church wants to love its neighbors and therefore is closing its doors, even though it doesn't have to. There is Canadian religion in a nutshell. Corbella comments, that's the right loving attitude or responsibility towards others and should be the attitude of all churches and all individuals. As you have doubtless heard, the government of Alberta has declared a state of public health emergency. New measures have been introduced to stop widespread community transmission of the virus, he said. While these new restrictions do not introduce new measures for First Alliance, we continue to err on the side of caution, and we want to do all we can to love our neighbors by reducing the R number in the coming weeks. If you read the Gospels, Jesus spoke often of the R number and its vital importance. The rules may not impact us, but we can make an impact by choosing to go the second mile, he added, quoting Jesus in the Gospel of Matthew, when he said, if someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with them 2 miles. Together, we can make a difference to protect the vulnerable and stand with our essential workers in these challenging times. Our online campus will continue to broadcast on Facebook, YouTube, and live FACCalgary.com, he said, pointing out that a new Christmas series of message is starting. Essential workers. Well, I guess pastors are not essential workers then, according to Patton. Is it tough for churches to close down at Christmas, one of the most important times of the year? Of course. Is it their right to remain open? Yes, it is. But sometimes our responsibility to others are much more important than exercising our rights. As the great U.S. civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. said, the time is always right to do what is right. That is really profound. Protecting the most vulnerable in our society from catching this dreadful virus is the right thing to do. It's inconvenient and dreadfully difficult, but it is right. Then she quotes Bob Dylan. Then she quotes Stephen Covey, best-selling author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Oh, Viktor Frankl gets a look in. Oh, yeah, let's... suddenly, she's talking about Nazi concentration camps. Which could be truer than she knows. Dr. Michael Ryan, this is again from Zero Hedge. Dr. Michael Ryan, Director of Global Alert and Response at the World Health Organization, told journalists in a press briefing on Monday that pinch points, otherwise known as places where people gather, must be managed. Ryan spoke about numerous types of public areas such as airports, public transportation, and even places like ski resorts that governments must manage to prevent further spreading of COVID-19. He called on governments around the world to investigate all forms of gatherings that lead to people congregating or moving en masse and how they are going to de-risk those processes. Ryan said if governments don't believe those processes cannot be de-risked, governments should curtail, postpone, or even manage those processes. In other words, just like Thanksgiving, Christmas is likely canceled in the Western world. There's been some good stuff on COVID-19 from Anthony Fury of the Toronto Sun. He writes, looks like my writing in the pages of the Sun is being targeted by the federal Liberal government. The Prime Minister and Health Minister are speaking out to let you, dear reader, know that I'm fake and I'm dangerous. Better watch out. The other week, I began reporting on COVID-19 statistics released by the Alberta government. Health experts around the world had been warning people that those with underlying conditions were particularly vulnerable to the virus. But we never had actual data telling us to what degree this phenomenon was unfolding. Now we do. Alberta data shows that as of last count, 76.3% of people who have died of COVID-19 were dealing with 3 or more underlying conditions. Those conditions range from more common ailments such as diabetes and hypertension to dementia, liver cirrhosis, and cancer. Only 2.3% of deaths, 11 people, were otherwise healthy persons dying without any underlying conditions. And those 11 include people who were very advanced in age. While other provinces don't make this information available, I have since written a second story on how StatsCan data confirms this is pretty much the same story nationally. And I have a third story on the same subject coming out soon. Medical experts I interviewed for my stories, both infectious disease specialists and doctors treating COVID-19 patients in ICUs, said this was important data to report and discuss. It underscores who is at high risk of COVID-19 and deserving of extra attention, and offers some insights into who is low risk and therefore can potentially be freed from some of the more damaging restrictions we now live under. You'd think that this would be useful data for policymakers to consider. Apparently not. On Wednesday, Prime Minister Trudeau said in the House of Commons the work downplayed the number of deaths. Then on Thursday, Health Minister Patty Hajdu arose during question period to label it fake and dangerous news. It's all rather rich coming from a health minister who said that questioning China's COVID-19 data was pushing conspiracy theories, which was a parroting of Chinese Communist Party talking points. And yes, this is the same Hajdu who was found to have traveled multiple times for personal reasons after telling Canadians they can't do the same. It was also found to have broken the rules around mask wearing at an airport lounge, but I digress. This isn't about my work at all. It's really an attempt to score points against Conservative MP Rachel Harder. The Lethbridge MP posted my original column on her Facebook page with 0 additional commentary. For some reason, this angered some constituents. A bizarre CBC News story then surfaced with the headline, Lethbridge MP under fire for spreading, wait for it, misinformation about COVID deaths in Alberta. The substance of the piece is that it quotes a Calgary family doctor who says, quote, to say that the real death toll is, double digits is absolutely ludicrous. It's misinformation. There's that word again, unquote. This is not what the piece says. No matter, because this clearly fed into the political designs of the Liberals. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau denounced Harder on Wednesday, saying that she downplayed this week the number of deaths. On Thursday, Hajdu stretched things even further. She was asked by Conservative health critic Michelle Rempel a question about vaccines and deflected by responding that the Conservatives should have stopped their members from sharing fake and dangerous news. This story gets even better. After this column was written, Prime Minister Trudeau met with the opposition leader, Erin O'Toole. In advance of the meeting, the Prime Minister's office put out a press release saying that Trudeau had heavily criticized Erin O'Toole for Rachel Harder and her misinformation on COVID-19. They hadn't met yet. And the Prime Minister's office puts out a press release saying what happened at a meeting that hadn't happened in order to take another swipe at Rachel Harder. It's some government we have in this country. The question of whether Canadians are going to get vaccines, and of course this is the fault of Stephen Harper or Brian Mulroney. Justin Trudeau has been Prime Minister for 5 years. I suppose if he wanted to ramp up vaccine production in Canada, he could have done so, but he did not. And according to the Hill Times, if Canadians have to wait behind everyone else to get this vaccine, this is going to be politically disastrous. From the Daily Mail, Cuomo tells hospitals to recruit retired doctors now and warns second lockdown is possible as COVID hospitalizations soar to the same level as March 23rd. And that's before all the Thanksgiving infections. And Dr. Anthony Fauci, this is from Stacey Lennox at PJ Media, better late than never, perhaps because he believes Joe Biden will be inaugurated in January. Dr. Fauci is finally admitting that children do not get terribly ill from or transmit COVID-19 in any significant way. Weird, since Switzerland figured this out in April. Detailed genetic studies in Iceland showed that children were not passing the virus to adults in any significant numbers in June. And German researchers asserted that children could actually act as a brake on transmission within the community. But good old follow the science Fauci was wringing his hands and hedging his bets in the media and during congressional testimony. Most notably, he got into a heated exchange with Senator Rand Paul, who is also a doctor. Senator Paul correctly noted Sweden's experience, which never closed their primary schools and did not see a spike in childhood illness. Germany also reopened schools in July with no significant issues. Since the summer, most industrialized countries have reopened schools, and many do not enforce distancing or mask wearing. But this did not impress Dr. Fauci. Paul noted the devastating effects of school closures, especially on disadvantaged children. It is only in the next decade that we'll understand the impact of all this missed support services on these children. However, we do know that many are not logging in for digital learning. Failure rates have also gone up where children only engage in distance learning. Doctors and other agencies note increases in child abuse, depression, and other mental health issues in children. There has also been an uptick in self-harm and suicidal ideation. This over a respiratory virus with an infection fatality rate of 0.13%, according to the WHO, which is very stratified by age and tends to affect the very elderly. I don't know what excuse they have for not opening schools. I'm sure the teachers union will moan that opening schools is a death warrant for them. This is from Hannah Blow at Breitbart. Here's some of the results of the draconian lockdowns and the erasure of our civil liberties. Over a quarter of small businesses in New York and New Jersey areas hit hardest by the Chinese coronavirus pandemic have not reopened this year. According to tracktherecovery.org, which revealed that 27.8% of small businesses in New York have not reopened following the mass shutdowns that occurred in the state this year as of November 16th. Even more businesses remain closed in New Jersey, 31.2%. The New York Post reported the figures are in line with estimates from the New Jersey Business and Industry Association, which says 28% of the Garden State's small businesses had shut up shop by the end of October, according to the Star-Ledger newspaper. More than half of small businesses in both states were forced to shut their doors in the spring at the height of the pandemic, with both hitting highs in mid-April, 52.5% of New York businesses and 53.9% in the Garden State, the stats show. The news comes as virus rates begin to spike, prompting Governors Cuomo and Phil Murphy to reintroduce restrictions in their respective states. Stephen Glover in the Mail asks, why has Michael Gove, one of Britain's brightest politicians, turned into such a zealot for lockdowns? He begins, Michael Gove is to the Tory party what Mikhail Suslov was to the Soviet Communist Party in the 1960s and 70s, a chief ideologue and brainbox. But whereas Suslov was a hardliner and extreme authoritarian, Gove was, until recently, seen as a social liberal and libertarian. One did not associate him with the expansion of state power. COVID has changed all that. Somehow, the pandemic has transformed the once broad-minded cabinet office minister. It may sound an unimportant job, but he may well be the second most powerful man in the government, into a sort of Tory Suslov. Gove reportedly argued strongly at a meeting last Wednesday for putting the whole of London in the extreme Tier 3, which would have devastated the capital's already shaky economy. Well, here's the thing. Michael Gove is still getting paid. and he can destroy Britain's economy. He can destroy British society. He'll still get paid. There is no, what can be done? What can be done? Nothing, apparently. Let's look at the chat here, see what's going on there. Polygon says, don't wear a mask, invite many people to your home, call the cops on your liberal neighbor's family, get drunk, and be merry. Gerard Perry says, even de Blasio, who's a complete imbecile, is reopening the schools. The idea that COVID is a threat to anyone under 16 is an illustration of how ignorant the people are. Oh, we keep getting these stories that some teenager died somewhere. This teenager was suffering from some other disease or diseases which were not mentioned in the story. Again, we know what's going on, that people with cancer, advanced cancer, terminal cancer, are taken to hospital and they get infected with COVID-19 because the hospitals have proved to be absolutely useless at protecting their patients. And when they die, their deaths are ascribed to COVID. Media Hit says, Polygon's revenge on them by dirty tactics and just living the good life. Rescue Steve says they may even consider holding back all K-12 students if grades testing get poor enough. Who is the Suslov of NRX, says Jonathan Pohl. Are people still talking about neo-reactionism? I hadn't noticed that. Metatron says, stop wearing masks when outside by yourself. Take that energy and educate yourself about how viruses travel. Oh, wait, that's problematic. I apologize. Please don't cancel me. I must confess that I've been close in recent weeks. You know, when I'm out on my balcony, which is directly behind me, and I see people walking by on the sidewalk, and, you know, it's raining and it's outdoors, and they're wearing masks. I just feel this urge to shout, why are you wearing a mask? Is the atmosphere looking for an excuse to attack you? That the COVID-19 virus is lurking at the corner, and they see a man or a woman walking the street without a mask, and they said, let's get them, boys. I'll get the mouth. I'll get the nose. I'll get the eyes. You think it's something like that? Chocokin666 says, I only wear a mask to avoid a conflict. I'm volatile and can't afford to get locked up. Masked solo car drivers, endless source of LOL, says Buddy. I went out to the University of British Columbia on Saturday, which is a place where I worked for 12 years. And I'd heard about the building spree there, but they have a new bus depot there, which is underground, or it's underneath a parkade. And I walked out of there, and this is, you know, the main boulevard, and I don't recognize any of this. The student union building is now called the Life Center, and it appeared to have been closed on Saturday. And in any event, it now shuts at 6 o'clock every night. So I went to the Woodward Biomedical Library, and there was a sign on it saying that it was closed because of COVID-19. I went to the main library, and I found out that it was closed as well because of COVID-19. And a thought occurred to me that throughout history, there have been those who have argued that books are dangerous. Well, the University of BC agrees. Books are dangerous because they can give you bat flu. So there is no in-person teaching going on at the University of British Columbia, and the libraries are closed. I think it's very foolish of them to have done this, because the obvious question comes up, why do we need a University of British Columbia? There's no teaching going on, and you can't get books from the library, because why would students need books? Everything you need to know is on a computer screen. So why don't they just turn all the buildings there at UBC into upscale condos? Win-win. Okay. Ugly people love the mask security blanket, says Buddy. Metatron says, yes, I'm trying not to yell at these people, LOL. Jonathan Pohl says, here, being on the sidewalk without a mask is a $250 fine. Chocokin666 says Rockefeller University Medical ruined their beautiful campus, genius landscape architecture with building postmodern facilities constantly. UBC, when it began in the early 20th century, it was going to be a neo-Gothic university. That was the style at the time. The old main library and several other buildings are built in neo-Gothic. But it was in the 1960s that building started to explode at UBC, and you got these brutalist horrors like the Buchanan Tower and the aforesaid Woodward Biomedical Library. And then they went through a phase of glazed brick, that they just fell in love with glazed brick. But the new buildings that have been erected at UBC, it's just glass, steel and glass. In fact, the main library has been engulfed. The old main library has been engulfed by a hideous steel and glass structure. One of the great things about UBC was, the vistas, that there was all of this unused space. You could see for long distances. Well, a lot of that is gone now. And to my enormous surprise, on the south side of University Boulevard, where the campus ends to where the university property ends, on the north side, all the trees have been torn down. On the south side, all of the trees have been torn down and to be replaced with condos that are being built by the Musqueam Indian Band. Media Hit says they're going to make the public universities a new place for the homeless and refugees to hang out. Metatron says, sorry, man, this to Professor Pohl, California in principle is worse than Kimland or Airstrip 1. When the governor is caught breaking all of the rules at a French restaurant, which is the ridiculous name of the French Laundry, with $800 meals, you got a dozen people sitting around a table, side by side by side by side. So no social distancing, no mask wearing. The governor is photographed doing this. How does a politician survive that sort of thing? Well, because his attitude, the attitude of all the politicians is, what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? You want to protest? You want to start petitions? Whatever. I don't care. I don't care at all. There's nothing that you can do to get rid of me. I suppose they could have a recall election, but isn't it rather dangerous holding elections now? That's what I'm told. Rescue Steve says, have you covered the Great Barrington debate? Indeed, I have. Media Hit says, be careful or Trudeau will call you a COVID denier. And I'll use that as a segue to Lockdown Skeptics, Jonathan Barr. Today we're proud to be bringing you a new blockbuster piece by Dr. Mike Yeadon, in which he debunks the notion that we're in the midst of a second wave. He believes most parts of England reached herd immunity by June this year, and systematically takes apart the PCR testing data that seems to show daily cases numbering tens of thousands a day. This is, as he and Dr. Claire Craig have said before, a false positive pseudo-epidemic. But Dr. Yeadon has never set out his case so clearly with such a wealth of evidence as he has done in his new article. He's particularly illuminating on the shortcomings of the super labs set up to process hundreds of thousands of PCR tests every day, drawing on his own 29-year career conducting and supervising laboratory work in the UK. Briefly, the Pandemic was over by June, and herd immunity was the main force which turned the pandemic and pressed it into retreat. In the autumn, the claimed cases are an artifact of a deranged testing system, which I explain in detail below. While there is some COVID-19 along the lines of the secondary ripple concept explained above, it has occurred primarily in regions, cities, and districts that were less hard hit in the spring. Real COVID-19 is self-limiting and may already have peaked in some northern towns. It will not return in force, and the example again is London. Even here, certain boroughs, such as Camden and Sutton, have had minimal positive test results. I've explained a number of times how this happened. The prominent role of prior immunity is often ignored or misunderstood. The extent of this was so large that, coupled with the uneven spread of infection, it needed only a low percentage of the population to be infected before herd immunity was reached. Again, from Lockdown Skeptics, we have previously shared the findings of Tim Spector, Professor of Genetic Epidemiology at King's College London. He is the founder of the Zoe app, which over 1 million people use to report their symptoms every week, and which has become a prime source of rapid, near real-time data about COVID-19. He received an OBE for this work earlier this year. Writing in The Spectator, he says COVID-19 rates for the UK are now falling in nearly all major regions. The government and the opposition, who believe in lockdown, will say that the fall in the number of confirmed cases, deaths, and hospitalization proves Lockdown 2.0 was a success, regardless of the extra health costs associated with lockdowns. Looking at our data, I concluded last month that we had passed the peak of new COVID-19 cases before we went into the second English lockdown. Our data has since been backed up by the ONS survey and GP surveillance records that track new consultations. Hospital admissions, which lag new cases, also peaked shortly after the lockdown of November the 5th. Yes, in Switzerland, no lockdown, no Armageddon. And of course, same can be said, even more so of Sweden. A new research published in the Medical Journal of Australia has thrown light on the compromises made in the publication processes of medical journals, a consequence of the rush for new research. 9 News has more. The research examined the 5 medical journals considered to be the most critical to informing global health policy and clinical practices: The Lancet, the New England Journal of Medicine, the Journal of the American Medical Association, the British Medical Journal, and the Annals of Internal Medicine. The analysis compared 134 research papers published between January 1st and May 31st this year to 54 published during the same period in 2019. The research found that 1 in 5 COVID-19 studies published by the journals during the first 5 months of the pandemic had corrections issued after publication. This compares to 7.4% published during the same period last year. 3 studies had to be retracted altogether, including a highly publicized hydroxychloroquine trial published in The Lancet. This led to a temporary cessation of the WHO trial into hydroxychloroquine. No such retractions were made in 2019. Yes, and I'm not really thrilled about all these vaccines because, as I've mentioned before, they were rushed. And the vaccine makers are not liable for anyone who gets sick or dies because of it. And again, I'm reminded that the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police of London is a lesbian dwarf called Cressida Dick. Yes. A member of the Free Speech Union, Dominic Martin, has written to Cressida Dick to complain about the heavy-handed policing of Saturday's anti-lockdown protest in central London. He writes, "I'm writing to express my disgust at how your police force handled the anti-lockdown protest in central London, indeed, how it has handled several previous demonstrations. They have been suppressed in an overly zealous and excessively forceful manner, which brings shame upon the force and is chillingly reminiscent of scenes we have seen in recent months in Belarus and Hong Kong. As bad as the overreaction is, it is made far worse by the complete inaction shown this summer in regards to other protests, such as when far larger crowds were allowed to gather under the banner of Black Lives Matter at the height of the first lockdown. Not only were these demonstrations given sanction to go ahead, they were lightly policed, and indeed several police officers were seen running away when provoked, with protesters given free rein to vandalize public statuary. Furthermore, several police officers were filmed taking the knee, which, given that BLM is at heart a political lobby group, was a clear violation of police neutrality. And let's have a look in at what Alex Berenson has to say. Taylor Nichols, MD, had tweeted, "We exist in a cycle of fear and isolation, fear of getting sick on the front lines, fear of bringing a virus home and exposing our families, fear of the developing surge of patients, fear of losing our colleagues, fear of not having what we need to take care of patients." Berenson comments, "When did this high-pitched whine become the voice of medicine? I have heard from more doctors, nurses, and EMTs than I can count the last 9 months, and I can only say they are disgusted by the constant complaining. They do their jobs professionally and well. They don't expect to be thanked for caring for patients with different political views. They like their jobs. They know they are paid well and respected. And they are aware that COVID is not the only illness or insist that society has to stay home because they are working too hard." So that's enough COVID for today, don't you think? I wanted to talk about life on other planets. I remember in 1976, when I was in London, I saw a fascinating BBC documentary on the question of what to do if we on Earth were contacted by some form of life from, I don't know, another galaxy, say. Now, it's curious to me, exceedingly curious, that not only does it seem that most people believe that life of some sort outside Earth has been discovered, there is zilch evidence. No evidence of this at all. But people like the late Carl Sagan, they seem to have a religious significance for them. That, yes, of course there's life on other planets. No, why would you say of course? There's absolutely no evidence whatsoever. But that these aliens, they must be smarter than us and morally superior to us. They could show us a thing or two. The BBC documentary, looked at this, and they came to the conclusion that, okay, what are the possible upsides of communicating with aliens? Well, perhaps they have fantastic knowledge, which they would be grateful to pass on to us and thus improve our lives. On the other hand, there is the possibility they might decide to eat us or just to destroy the Earth for fun. So the BBC came to the conclusion that if the transgalactic telephone rings, best not to answer. The story from the Mail by Jonathan Chadwick: statisticians say the evolution of intelligent life is exceptionally rare and that human-like civilizations are extremely unlikely to exist on other planets. In a new paper, Oxford researchers theorized that for life to evolve in the same way elsewhere in the universe, it would take longer than the whole of Earth's projected lifespan. Evolution on Earth from the Big Bang up until the current day has involved a series of what they call evolutionary transitions that were helped by science. These include the emergence of primitive life from non-living matter, known as abiogenesis, and eukaryotic life with cells that have a nucleus enclosed, the evolution of sexual reproduction, multicellularity, and intelligence itself. If intelligent life does exist on other planets, it would need to have gone through a series of comparable evolutionary transitions. The research draws on the Fermi paradox, which is the apparent contradiction between the lack of evidence for extraterrestrial civilizations and various high estimates for their probability. It took approximately 4.5 billion years for a series of evolutionary transitions resulting in intelligent life to unfold on Earth. The experts from Oxford University's Future of Humanity Institute say in their paper, in another billion years, the increasing luminosity of the sun will make Earth uninhabitable for complex life. Billion years, I can hardly wait. Together with the dispersed timing of key evolutionary transitions and plausible priors, one can conclude that the expected transition times likely exceed the lifetime of Earth, perhaps by many orders of magnitude. In turn, this suggests that intelligent life is likely to be exceptionally rare. Now, it's fairly obvious to me why you have all these people pounding on about life on other planets. They are overwhelmingly atheists. And the idea that intelligent life, in fact, life of any kind, exists only on Earth, it makes them feel bad because it means that we are special. And it's going to lead a lot of people, I don't know, to religion, the idea of a God. So, if there's just all sorts of other civilizations, intelligent civilizations, and of course there must be, then all this silly talk about God, well, we can just abandon that. It is the central conceit of Stanley Kubrick's film 2001, A Space Odyssey, which was co-written with Arthur Clarke, is that the discovery of the existence, the definitive discovery of the existence of intelligent life outside Earth would be devastating to the psychological health of the population. But again, this seems like a curious notion now, because again, as I say, it seems that most people actually believe that some sort of life has been found on other planets, and there is no evidence of this whatsoever. But you see how powerful the atheists are in molding our thinking. Apparently, a woman kicked a football on the weekend, and this is very big news. Very, very big news. It's just it's thrilling, absolutely thrilling. And thank you, Joe Biden. This was at Vanderbilt University, which has not won a game this year. They were beaten in the game 41-0. And I believe that they have fired their coach, who has a career record at Vanderbilt of 27 wins and 54 losses. Jason Whitlock writes on Outkick, the people who hate football and the people who spent the whole summer trying to cancel college football over COVID concerns came together to celebrate the game Saturday. Sarah Fuller briefly made football socially acceptable for America's most ardent virtue signalers. That was her primary accomplishment, pleasing Make-A-Wish America. Make-A-Wish America. I like that. At the beginning, okay, where did this story go? I'm clicking on the More button. Why isn't it giving me more of this story? I don't know whether you've seen the video of Sarah Fuller kicking the football. She didn't attempt a field goal. Apparently, she can only kick field goals if she's within 15 yards of the end zone, which means that she's useless as a field goal kicker. She had a kickoff from center field. She did not put it at the end of the end zone. Nope. It was a squib kick. And the other team recovered the ball on their 37-yard line, which means that not only is she a crummy place kicker, she is just a crummy kicker all in all. And as many people have pointed out, there were any number of people on the Vanderbilt team who could have kicked the ball better than Sarah Fuller, but she was named the special teams player of the week for her conference for being crummy at kicking a football. It's just all too much. Let's see. James Fulford wrote at VDare, the reason Vanderbilt was able to engage in what Steve Saylor called the publicity stunt of dressing the school's women's soccer team goalie as their place kicker is because no one is allowed to touch the normally male place kicker when he's kicking a field goal. This is why football teams can hire European soccer players who walk on the field, kick the ball, and walk off. Place kickers in the NFL are smaller and older than regular football players because they don't get hit, although occasionally they get bumped into during a kick return. Vanderbilt's Sarah Fuller was not doing a kick return, and it would have been irresponsible of Vanderbilt to let her do so. Here's what happened in 1989 when 17-year-old Tawana Hammond was allowed to play high school football for the Francis Scott Key Eagles as a fullback. Notoriously one of the most brutal positions in the game, the job requirements involve shedding tackles. She was tackled in her first scrimmage, got internal injuries that required removal of her spleen and half of her pancreas, and was in the intensive care unit for 10 weeks, where she received 22 units of blood. She and her parents sued the school on the theory that they failed to warn her that football was dangerous. And there's a list of stories here. And none of these stories, by the way, make the obvious point that they should have warned her that football was dangerous for girls. Again, from Fulford at Avidair, Title IX, the football coach, and the King of the Hill. This is Title IX, Dick Nixon's greatest mistake. Title IX, disparate impact women in sports and useless Republicans. The Griggs decision by the Supreme Court in 1971 produced the disparate impact doctrine, holding that if blacks passed a test at a lower rate than whites, then it was the test that was at fault. Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, passed in 1972, has led to the assumption by courts and not necessarily by universities that if women are less interested in sports than men, it must be men that are at fault. As Steve Saylor notes below, this and the consequent destruction of men's athletic teams at colleges around the country is why a member of the Vanderbilt women's soccer team was asked to suit up as a place kicker in a non-historic event at a men's football game. Now, I'm just reminded of something, that this woman, Sarah Fuller, she did this interview after the game where she's just all smiles, and this is just a great day for womankind, mankind. When your team is beaten 41-0, you are not on the field after the game smiling and yucking it up and celebrating your triumph of making a very poor effort at a kickoff. But here we see how one woman becomes bigger than the whole game. It's just all so stupid. But wait, there's more. This is from Associated Press. Browns Chief of Staff Callie Brownson will handle game day duties for Cleveland's tight ends on female in Jacksonville. The first in the team history for a female. Is this the person? Is this Callie Brownson? I'm just going to do an image search on, yeah, if I hadn't been told that this was a woman, I would have misgendered this person, because this person looks astonishingly male. Just astonishingly so. 99 out of 100 people would say that it is a man and not a woman. So chicks are in football now. Wonder how long it is before men are started to get pushed out of it. And in final football news, we know that young people, particularly healthy young people, like, football players, are not at risk from COVID. But we've had all of these college games canceled, and this just ludicrous situation involving the Denver Broncos. This is from UPI. The New Orleans Saints cruised to a 31-3 win Sunday at Empower Field after the Denver Broncos were forced to use an emergency quarterback because of COVID-19 complications. Broncos starting quarterback Drew Lock, backup Brent Ripien, and practice squad signal caller Blake Bortles were disqualified from competing over the weekend when the NFL learned the three players weren't wearing masks Wednesday, the day before third-string quarterback Jeff Driscoll tested positive for the coronavirus. With Locke, Ripon, and Bortles out for Sunday's game due to the league's contact tracing protocols, the Broncos went with 23-year-old rookie Kendall Hinton, a practice squad wide receiver and former Wake Forest quarterback, under center against the Saints. Hinton, who attempted his first pass since facing Clemson in 2018 while at Wake Forest, completed only one of 9 pass attempts for 13 yards and 2 interceptions. The Broncos managed only 112 offensive yards, marking Denver's lowest output on offense since finishing with 128 yards in a loss at Washington in October of 1922. The 112 offensive yards that New Orleans allowed was the lowest total in franchise history. Yeah. Oh, I see the head coach is blaming the quarterbacks because it makes just so much sense to wear masks outdoors. This is a game in which, men often suffer very serious injuries. And now they're afraid of a virus, which is little different from the flu. Let's take a final look at the chat. Polygon says COVID-19 is a moral panic perpetuated largely and solely by psychotic libs. Well, yeah, but it just goes to show that so many of the people that we call right-wing are not in fact right-wing. And I don't want to hear any of these people, not one of them, carry on about freedom, liberty anymore because they don't believe in it. They simply don't. How is Andy Reid still ambulatory at this point? That's my question. Yeah. They should have rotated in John Elway, says Gerald Perry. Media Hit says maybe a certain Broncos owner bet on their team losing, hence 2 of their starting quarterbacks were pulled off the team. Josh Randall disavows says, what happens when a female quarterback gets a serious concussion? Football will be canceled. Well, maybe they could, in order to protect the women in the game, they could just, make it flag football. No more hitting. Polygon says, I went to see a woman play in a men's water polo match, LOL. It's a very strenuous game, water polo. In fact, a fellow I used to work for, his children were involved in competitive water polo. And it was weird to hear them talk about their fear of liver failure because of all the Tylenol that they had been taking for so many years. Gerald Perry says the Hungarians are good at this sport, and that's why they were in the sport, because the fellow in charge of the water polo was Hungarian. Of course, in 1956, the Hungarians famously defeated the Soviet Union in the Olympics, a point of pride for the Hungarians. Jaco Raipala, our Finnish friend, says, we had the right-wing opposition go nuts in Corona moral panic. I think it's more a feature of democracy and social media and a lack of trust in people with other political opinions than any specific side. Yes, essentially, there have been some, holdouts, Trump and some Republican governors, but it's just panic. Well, let's panic, and we must do something. Do we know that this is going to work? We have to do something. Don't you understand? We have to do something, but we don't know very much about this disease yet. It doesn't matter. We have to do something, anything. And now, everything has to be locked down again because, I don't want to be the only person who is, destroying the economy and destroying society. When we get together for our meetings, how could I hold my head if I had not done my bit to destroy my state or my province's economy and society? What's coming up on the show this week? On Theater Thursday, I will be talking about Terry Gilliam's dystopian satire, Brazil. And on the book club this week, I will be discussing an exceedingly profound book by the Spanish philosopher Miguel de Unamuno. It is called A Tragic Sense of Life. I'll be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I would appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not done so already. If you would like to contribute to this live stream, Very much appreciated, especially at this time. My PayPal account is linked to Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. Once again, Kevin_Grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send a donation directly via Interact to kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with this. In these days of social isolation and civilizational collapse, I do dearly wish that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to find a genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.